My name is Danny. I've been on the streets now for about 2 years.
People think that homelessness is like the worst thing in the world. And to me, it's been very enlightening.
I lost my apartment, I lost my pet, my family. I'm all homeless right now, trying to survive.
Right now, as you watch this video, over 158,000 people are homeless in New York City. That's more people than the entire population of most American cities. But here's what will really shock you. 1 in every 8 children in New York's public schools has no permanent home to sleep in tonight. Think about that for a second. In the city that never sleeps, 146,000 kids don't have a safe bed to rest their heads. You might think you know about homelessness in America, but what's happening in New York right now will make your jaw drop. We're not talking about a few people on street corners asking for change. We're talking about a humanitarian crisis so massive that it increased by 53% in just 1 year. But why is this happening in one of the world's richest cities? And what are people actually experiencing on these streets that most of us never see? When was the last time you walked through New York City? Did you notice the person sleeping in the subway station, the family carrying all their belongings in shopping bags, the children who look a little too thin, a little too tired for their age? Most people walk right past, but today we're going to stop and look at what's really happening. The numbers alone should terrify you. In 2024, New York saw the largest increase in homelessness of any state in America. We're talking about a 53% jump in just 12 months. That means every single day, hundreds more people are losing their homes, their safety, their dignity. But these aren't just numbers on a government report. These are real people, real families, real children whose lives have been turned upside down. What's causing this explosion in homelessness? The answer might surprise you. It's not just about not having enough money for rent, though that's certainly part of it. The reality is much more complex and much more frightening. Mental illness affects a huge portion of the homeless population, with thousands of people cycling through the streets with serious mental health issues that go untreated. Can you imagine being sick, confused, and having nowhere safe to go? Then there's the drug crisis. Fentanyl has turned America's streets into war zones, and New York is no exception. People experiencing homelessness are dying from overdoses at alarming rates. The combination of mental illness, drug addiction, and lack of housing creates a perfect storm of human suffering. But here's what really keeps me up at night. Many of these people started out just like you and me. Think about this for a moment. What would it take for you to lose your home? A serious illness that wipes out your savings? A job loss that lasts too long? A family crisis that destroys your support system? For many people experiencing homelessness in New York, it wasn't a lifetime of bad choices. It was 1 or 2 major life events that pushed them over the edge. Let's talk about where these people actually sleep, because the reality will shock you. Over 4,000 people sleep on New York streets and in subway tunnels every single night. That's the highest number in more than a decade. But what does that actually mean? Picture trying to sleep on a subway platform with trains thundering past every few minutes. Imagine trying to stay warm in winter when temperatures drop below freezing, with nothing but cardboard and maybe a thin blanket. The subway system has become a massive homeless shelter, but not by design. People live in the tunnels beneath the city, in abandoned stations, anywhere they can find a few feet of space that offers some protection from the elements. These underground communities have their own rules, their own dangers, their own desperate attempts at survival. But what about the official shelters? Surely they're better than sleeping on the street, right? This is where the story gets even darker. Arrests at New York City homeless shelters doubled in 2024. Doubled. That means the places that are supposed to provide safety and refuge have become increasingly dangerous. We're talking about assault, theft, sexual violence, and drug dealing happening in the very places where vulnerable people go for help. Many homeless individuals actually choose to sleep on the streets rather than enter the shelter system because they feel safer outdoors. Can you imagine that? Feeling safer sleeping on a sidewalk in New York City than in a government-run facility designed to help you? What does that tell you about the conditions inside these shelters? The violence isn't just happening inside shelters either. People experiencing homelessness are far more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population. They're attacked, robbed, sexually assaulted, and sometimes killed, often by people who see them as easy targets. When you have no permanent address, no safe place to store belongings, no way to lock a door behind you, you become incredibly vulnerable to predators. Here's something that will really disturb you. About 1/3 of people experiencing homelessness struggle with alcohol or drug problems, and about 2/3 of those people have mental health issues as well. But here's the catch. It's often impossible to tell whether the mental illness and addiction caused the homelessness or whether the trauma of being homeless caused the mental illness and addiction. When you're sleeping on concrete, never knowing where your next meal will come from, constantly looking over your shoulder for danger, your mind can break down in ways you never imagined. Let's talk about the children for a moment, because this might be the most heartbreaking part of the entire crisis. Over 31,000 children are living in New York City shelters right now. These aren't teenagers who made bad choices. We're talking about babies, toddlers, elementary school kids who have never known what it feels like to have their own bedroom, their own toys, their own safe space. These children move from shelter to shelter, sometimes changing schools multiple times in a single year. They don't have a stable place to do homework, no quiet space to sleep, no way to invite friends over because they're embarrassed about where they live. The psychological damage this causes can last a lifetime. How do you explain to a 6-year-old why they can't go home after school like their classmates? The shelter system for families is overcrowded and chaotic. Families are often split up because different shelters have different rules about who can stay where. Mothers with teenage sons might be separated because many shelters don't allow older boys to stay with their mothers. Can you imagine being forced to choose between keeping your family together and having a roof over your head? But here's what makes the situation even more tragic. Many of these families were working people just months before they became homeless. They had jobs, paid rent, lived normal lives. Then something happened, a medical emergency, a layoff, an eviction, and suddenly they found themselves with nowhere to go. The safety net that's supposed to catch people when they fall has so many holes in it that thousands slip through every year. The waiting lists for permanent housing assistance are incredibly long. Some families wait years in the shelter system before finding permanent housing. Can you imagine living in temporary housing, moving your children from place to place for years on end? The stress alone would break most people. Now let's talk about something that most people don't want to discuss: the violence, harassment, and exploitation that happens to homeless women and men. When you're living on the streets, you become vulnerable to predators who know you have nowhere safe to go, no one to call for help, no address for police to find you if something happens. Women experiencing homelessness report extremely high rates of harassment and assault. Many describe having to trade intimate favors for a place to sleep, for food, for protection. They're forced into prostitution not because they want to, but because it's the only way they can survive. The trauma from these experiences can make it even harder to get back on their feet and find stable housing. Men aren't immune either. They face violence, robbery, and assault at rates much higher than the general population. When you're homeless, you're seen as less than human by some people, and that dehumanization makes violence easier to justify in the minds of attackers. The drug crisis has made everything worse. Fentanyl, which is incredibly addictive and deadly, has flooded the streets of New York. People who started using drugs to cope with the pain of homelessness often find themselves trapped in addiction cycles that make it nearly impossible to escape. The drug dealers know exactly where to find vulnerable customers, and they're often the only people offering any kind of immediate relief from the constant stress and fear of life on the streets. Overdoses happen constantly. Emergency responders carry naloxone, a drug that can reverse opioid overdoses, and they use it multiple times every single day. But naloxone only works if someone finds the person in time, and when you're sleeping alone under a bridge or in an abandoned building, there might not be anyone around to save you. The mental health crisis among homeless individuals is absolutely staggering. Thousands of people with serious mental illness cycle through New York streets without proper treatment. They might be schizophrenic, bipolar, suffering from severe depression or PTSD, but they're living on sidewalks instead of receiving the medical care they desperately need. Many of these individuals can't navigate the complex bureaucracy required to get help. They miss appointments because they don't have calendars or alarm clocks. They can't fill out paperwork because they can't concentrate or don't understand what's being asked. They show up to the wrong place at the wrong time and get turned away, often multiple times, until they give up trying altogether. The winter months are particularly deadly. When temperatures drop, people freeze to death on the streets of New York. Hypothermia and frostbite are constant threats. People burn whatever they can find to stay warm, sometimes starting fires that get out of control. They huddle together for warmth, but there's only so less body heat that you can't do anything when you're sleeping outdoors in freezing weather. Emergency rooms see a constant stream of homeless individuals suffering from exposure, malnutrition, untreated infections, and injuries from violence. But hospitals can only provide emergency care. Once someone is stable enough to be discharged, they often end up right back on the streets with nowhere else to go. The lack of basic sanitation creates massive health problems. Where do you go to the bathroom when you're homeless? Where do you shower? Where do you wash your clothes? Many homeless individuals go weeks or months without proper hygiene facilities, leading to skin infections, dental problems, and other health issues that get worse over time. Women face additional challenges with menstrual hygiene. Try to imagine dealing with your period while living on the street with no access to clean bathrooms, sanitary supplies, or private space. These basic human needs become enormous challenges when you have nowhere to call home. Food insecurity is constant. Many homeless individuals eat only one meal a day, often from soup kitchens or food pantries that have limited hours and long lines. Malnutrition is common, especially among children, leading to developmental problems and health issues that can last a lifetime. But here's something that might surprise you. Many homeless individuals actually have jobs. They work part-time or temporary positions, but they don't make enough money to afford rent in New York City, where housing costs have skyrocketed. They're what we call the working homeless, people who show up to work every day but sleep in shelters or on the streets every night. The bureaucracy that's supposed to help homeless people is often so complex and overwhelming that it actually prevents people from getting assistance. There are dozens of different programs with different eligibility requirements, different application processes, different waiting lists. Many homeless individuals spend their entire days going from office to office, filling out forms, waiting in lines, only to be told they need to come back another day with different documents. The stigma surrounding homelessness makes everything harder. Homeless individuals are often treated as if they're dangerous criminals rather than people in need of help. They're banned from public spaces, arrested for sleeping in parks, moved along by police who have nowhere else to send them. This constant harassment makes it even more difficult to find stability and get back on their feet. Children experiencing homelessness face unique challenges in school. They often don't have clean clothes, school supplies, or a quiet place to do homework. They're tired from poor sleep, hungry from irregular meals, and stressed from constantly worrying about where they'll sleep that night. These factors make it incredibly difficult to focus on learning, creating educational gaps that can follow them for the rest of their lives. The cycle of homelessness can span generations. Children who grow up homeless are more likely to experience homelessness as adults. They miss out on the stability and opportunities that housed children take for granted, making it harder to break free from poverty and housing instability. What's perhaps most shocking is how quickly someone can become homeless in New York City. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is now over $3,000 per month. For minimum wage workers, that means spending more than 80% of their income on rent alone, leaving almost nothing for food, transportation, healthcare, or emergencies. One unexpected expense, a medical bill, car repair, or job loss, can push someone from barely making ends meet to living on the streets. The shelter system is so overcrowded that families are often placed in hotels, sometimes far from their children's schools and jobs. These temporary placements can last for months, creating instability that makes it even harder to get back on their feet. Children might have to travel hours each day to get to school, or families might be forced to change schools multiple times. Many people experiencing homelessness also struggle with untreated medical conditions. Diabetes, heart disease, mental illness, and other chronic conditions become life-threatening when you don't have access to regular medical care, proper nutrition, or a safe place to rest and recover. The criminal justice system often makes homelessness worse rather than better. People are arrested for things like sleeping in public, panhandling, or trespassing, but jail time doesn't solve the underlying problem of not having anywhere to live. In fact, having a criminal record makes it even harder to find housing and employment, creating a cycle that traps people in homelessness. So why is this crisis so much worse in New York than other places? The high cost of housing is certainly a major factor, but it's not the only one. New York's shelter system, while extensive, is also overwhelmed and underfunded. The city's mental health services are inadequate for the scale of need. Drug treatment programs have long waiting lists. Job training and employment services often don't address the specific barriers that homeless individuals face. The recent surge in homelessness has been linked to several factors, including the economic impacts of the pandemic, changes in migration patterns, and cuts to social services. When people lose their jobs, exhaust their savings, and can't find affordable housing, they end up on the streets. When support services are cut or overwhelmed, people fall through the cracks. But here's what might be the most important thing to understand about this crisis. Every single person experiencing homelessness is someone's child, parent, sibling, or friend. They have names, stories, dreams, and potential. They're not statistics or problems to be solved. They're human beings who deserve dignity, safety, and hope. The solutions exist, but they require massive investment and political will. Permanent supportive housing, comprehensive mental health services, drug treatment programs, job training, and affordable housing development could dramatically reduce homelessness. Other cities and countries have successfully reduced homelessness through coordinated efforts and adequate funding. This crisis didn't happen overnight, and it won't be solved overnight. But every day we delay action, more people die on the streets, more children grow up without homes, more families are destroyed by a system that should be protecting them. The next time you see someone experiencing homelessness, remember that they're not choosing to live this way. They're trapped in a situation that could happen to anyone, and they need help, not judgment. The crisis in New York is a reflection of our priorities as a society and our willingness to care for the most vulnerable among us. What will it take to solve this crisis? That's a question every American needs to ask themselves, because what's happening in New York is happening in cities across the country. The homeless crisis is not just a New York problem, it's an American problem, and it's getting worse every year. The question isn't whether we can afford to help these people. The question is whether we can afford not to. The cost of homelessness, in human suffering, in healthcare expenses, in crime, in lost potential, is far greater than the cost of providing stable housing and support services. This is the reality of homelessness in America today. It's not pretty, and it's not comfortable to think about, but it's happening right now while most of us go about our daily lives. The only question left is, what are we going to do about it?